Hi, I'm Joe White. I want to welcome you to the Grow Real Estate Investing Podcast. Today, I'm going to be talking about whether using a property management company is the right decision for your rental property. So, besides usual legal housekeeping that I do in every podcast, alerting you that I'm not an attorney, I'm not a financial advisor, nor an accountant, and that my podcasts are never an intention to give you advice along those lines. I should also tell you that I own a property management company here in Philadelphia called Grow Property Management. So my advice on whether someone should use a property management company or not is probably going to be biased. That said, I'll strive to give as accurate advice as possible, as always on the Grow Real Estate Investing Podcast, including on the pros and cons of using a property management company. I'll try to keep my love for what I do out of it. All right, let's get right into this. First, what do property management companies do? Each state is different, but most states require property managers to be licensed. In Pennsylvania, property management is a state licensed activity. To be a property manager requires a real estate license and can only be done through a licensed real estate brokerage and through a licensed broker of record. As I mentioned, I own a real estate brokerage, which I am the broker for. And Grow Property Management operates through that brokerage. Now, there are exceptions where a property can be managed by someone without a license. So you are allowed to manage your own rental properties, or you can do it for someone else as long as you are doing it for free and without compensation. Where these might come up is that the city of Philadelphia, for example, requires rental property owners to designate a person that will be responsible for the property, and that person must live within the city limits. If there's an emergency, the city wants to know someone will be there. Now, this person can be the owner, but if the owner doesn't live within the city limits, they would need to designate an agent. But that person does not need to be a paid agent. If you have a friend, a neighbor, or your cousin that lives within city limits, that would work also. As long as they're not being paid, they do not need to be licensed. Also, a license isn't required if someone is a direct employee of the property owner. Employees also do not need to be licensed, but they must be an employee. They can't be a contractor or subcontractor. If you own a large apartment complex, for instance, your on-site office staff can legally manage your units. In regards to finding a licensed property management company, you do need to be careful. Here in Philadelphia, it's not uncommon, and I'm sure everywhere, to come across people doing property management unlicensed and completely unaware that it's a licensed activity. It's not unheard of that a contractor will sometimes decide to start managing properties and will get themselves, the properties, and the owners into deep trouble. Last week, a nice gentleman from New Jersey saw my company's reviews and asked if I would take over the 29 properties he's been managing in Philadelphia for the past 30 years. He wants to retire. I didn't have the heart to tell him that he's been breaking the law this whole time and that the penalties, if he had been caught, would have been crippling. In this case, he would have made an excellent legal property manager. Very professional, very conscientious, clearly cared for the properties and clearly cared for the owners. I had to turn him down as the properties are in such illegal states. Lack of property management licensing aside, the leases violated fair housing laws. He didn't seem to understand fair credit reporting laws, and the list kind of goes on from there. But this podcast, we're talking about well-established property management companies. If they appear established, they likely are. A good source to find an accredited property management company is through a national organization called an RPM. It's like being a realtor, but for property management companies. If you have a rental property, a property management company will manage that property for you. If they are a good property management company, that means they will handle all the hassles involved in owning a rental property, so you don't have to. The top property management companies will greatly increase your bottom line. A good property management company will greatly increase your rents, decrease your vacancy considerably, and they will lower your expenses. It is likely they will make you far more money on your rental than they cost you in property management fees. They will find you a tenant. They'll screen that tenant, collect the rents, handle late rents, manage incoming repairs, and depending on the company, they'll help you legalize your property as a rental and prep you for the end of the year tax season. So property management services vary wildly from company to company, but most property managers will completely manage every aspect of the rental property for you. They typically will keep the property legalized with federal, state, and local municipalities. They will market for tenants, screen the tenants, and validate them through a series of criminal credit background checks. A real estate agent might find you a tenant, but they get to move on. To a property management company, your tenant is also the property management company's tenant. A bad tenant becomes a problem for the company, so they'll tend to excel at weeding out bad tenants. They will manage the security deposits, collect the rents, manage late rental payments, bounce checks, evictions, and tenant move-ins and tenant move-outs. Property management companies typically handle any tenant repair request and maintenance to the property, hopefully monitoring and responding 24 hours a day. This is another way a property management company can be invaluable. When a repair is needed, the company likely has incredible, great contacts with a multitude of different contractors, like roofers, plumbers, electricians, housekeepers, locksmiths, etc. The list goes on to vendors that a property management company would need to service to keep a property running well. These contractors that work through the property management companies tend to be extremely well vetted, meaning before a plumber touches your property, he has likely already been proven in countless other properties the management company manages. They already know the plumber has fair pricing, that he does a good job before he ever touches your pipes. And accountability and buying power. Depending on how big the property management company is, that plumber likely gets considerable business from them. That brings discounts and a job that ensures that plumber will continue getting the easy source of business. So they're always going to do a really good job because they want that source of business. Property management companies handle property repairs differently, so be careful. Some will have an in-house repairman who works for the company. This would be a profit center for the company, and they likely can't hire the best contractors. A good plumber, for instance, wouldn't take a significant pay cut just to make sure the property management company is getting their half of the cost of every job. Why would they? So make sure the property management company is operating by referring different contractors. This way they refer who happens to be the best contractor at that moment and not which one gets them paid the most. The cost of property management company also greatly varies, but expect to pay 8 to 13% depending on what part of the country that you are in. The national average of property management fees set right around 10%. Vacation rental management companies can certainly run much higher due to the much increased workload that they're facing. But in a major city like Philadelphia, you would expect to pay in the lower range of around 8%. The reason being that the properties are much closer to the office, and row homes like in Philadelphia are all identical, making it easier for us to become experts. We're not having to figure out French drains, septic systems, or complicated roofs. I've dealt with raccoons, squirrels, and woodchucks, but that's rare. When I go into your row home, I know exactly how to fix it and the cost to fix it. Simply put, property management is easier in major cities, so the costs go way down. Now, obviously, a property management company alleviates all your landlord hassles involved with owning a rental property. And that is what tends to build my business. I would say 70 to 75% of our clients that engage our property management service do so just to avoid aggravation. We get property owners looking to avoid the paperwork, the late night calls, tenant difficulties, the legalizations, etc. A property management company does make real estate investing a much more passive form of investing and a lot more fun. But from an investment perspective, does a property manager make sense? Do the numbers add up? I've never read a real estate investing book, and I've read plenty, or source of information that didn't advocate for the investor to use a property management company. Some books merely assume you will and really don't get into the subject much. The reason why is that a property management company should make you far more than it costs you. In other words, you will hopefully get paid to eliminate your hassles. But there's also downsides, and I'll get to those. But first, here are the ways property managers increase your rental investment. They have relationships with vendors that an individual landlord can never have. They have incredible buying power. But each contractor, exterminator, roofer, plumber, electrician, and attorney, they aren't just bringing your property, they're bringing all the properties they manage. My property management company refers 6 figures in work to so many different contractors a year. So they tend to work for far less than they would otherwise. They tend to do a far better job, and they tend to do it much faster, and they tend to come back if they need to make something right. These vendors, like contractors and plumbers, are also well vetted by the time they repair your property. We have likely tested a roofer 40 times on another client's property or our own properties long before we send them to up on your roof. Do we ever run into bad contractors? Yes, absolutely. Do we continue using them in more than a property or two? No, absolutely not. Also, most vendors prefer working through property management referrals. Why? Because their workload goes way down. We simplify their day. They don't need to spend time. They could be working, getting paid, having to give estimates, since we typically already know the scope of work. We know how much this should cost. We schedule the work for them and get them easy access to the property. Our company is the path of least resistance. Contractors are not known for being good at running a business. And we take those tasks, we take over all those tasks for them. And a property management company typically pays the contractor. So in the case of my company, that means that as soon as we feel the work has been done to our satisfaction, we click a button and instantly pay the contractor by direct deposit. The contractor doesn't have to bill anyone. They don't have to wait for payment. They don't even need to take a check to the bank. And all those reasons deserve discounts, and all those reasons deserve loyalty. Increase rent and decrease vacancy. Few landlords can compete with the level of marketing a property management company does to find a tenant. Not only should a property manager get you far more rent than you can get otherwise, but they should be able to greatly decrease your vacancy. Saving you from a month more vacancy will pay you more in rent from that month than one entire year in property management fees. Remember, there's never a day that most larger property management companies don't have a vacancy. So they are likely constantly in a state of marketing. My company gets 40 to well over 100 inquiries a day from prospective tenants. We maintain a waiting placement list. Bargaining vacancies is property manager's job. And they are likely very good at it. And they should also be extremely streamlined doing it as well. So property management companies typically have staff to instantly answer the phones when prospective tenants call. Many property management companies like mine offer instant showings and allow the tenants to schedule their own showings. So obviously, a property management company can save you very expensive legal problems. I don't have numbers on how many landlords get into financial trouble with federal, state, and local cities. To me, it does feel like a lot. Why? Because landlords become our clients when they're in distress. They call us when they can't fill a vacancy or when they are facing legal doom, having unknowingly found themselves in extremely hot water. Rental properties have to be navigated through liabilities, or it can be expensive. A property manager does this just by the nature of the property management industry and the required education to be in it. I've seen landlords that have self-managed without incident for several years until they run into an issue. And I've seen tens of thousands of lost dollars. Is my perception skewed? Yeah, absolutely. Again, property owners tend to come to me when they're in trouble. The ones that avoid trouble might never come to us. I have no idea if 1 out of every 10 landlords gets in trouble, 1 out of 100, or 1 out of every 1,000. I do know that I own rental properties also, as I'm an active investor and have zero interest in hurting my investments the ways that I've seen a lot of landlords have done. Okay, so earlier I mentioned there are downsides to using a property management company. Here are a few. I mentioned that I get a lot of clients when property owners are in distress. Unfortunately, some of these owners are in distress from a bad relationship with a property management company. Real estate investing will never be passive. The books lie. You cannot simply hand over control to a property management company and forget about your investment. You must supervise. Maybe that is tuning in every 6 months. Maybe for you, it's tuning in every 3 months, or maybe it's tuning in monthly. This all depends on the company you're dealing with, but you will need to supervise the property management company. You are the property owner. You must keep the big picture facing the right direction. Is the property being cared for? I drive through the streets of Philadelphia and I can pick out all the rentals. They have that look. If it looks that way to me, it looks that way to prospective tenants. It will look that way to an appraiser, to an insurance inspector, and it's just going to anger the neighbors. An unloved property will cost you rent. It's going to increase your vacancy. It can increase your insurance, and it can cost you and your neighbor's equity. And costing your neighbor's equity will come back again and lose you even more equity. Anyone that follows my podcast knows I love equity. Cash flow protects us, and equity makes us rich. All right. So there's also hidden fees with some companies. Property management companies are chock full of hidden fees. Most companies will charge you a markup percentage for repairs. There can be a fee just because the tenant is staying another year. There can be a fee if the property is vacant. Also, many property management companies will require you to use them as your agent if you decide the property. So you don't even get to choose your agent. Again, you cannot be passive in your real estate investing, so pay attention. So it's clear my advice is no shock to use a property management company. I'm sure that's not a surprise since I own a property management company, but I do believe that paying qualified professionals like attorneys, accountants, property managers ultimately will make you money. I do believe an investor should use a property management company. I think it's a logical investment decision. Property managers make you scalable. You can own 1 unit to 10,000 units as long as you have the management teams in place. They give you money, value of time. How much is your time worth? Could you be using that time to make money doing something else, like concentrating on your career or finding your next property? Property managers are incredible sources of leads, by the way. There you have it. I'm Joe White. This is the Grow Real Estate Investing Podcast. Happy investing, everyone.